Well, good morning, Margaret. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Where are you joining us from today?
Well, so I am based in the DC metro area in the state of Maryland, just north in Silver Spring.
That's great. And did the cold snap get you guys pretty good this last week or so?
I'll tell you, my kids, so I've got some kids in high school. They were very excited about the cold snap and the snow and the layer of ice that actually made it very difficult for us to plow. So they've been out of school for a whole week.
Oh my goodness. We had our first 100 years snow last year here in Pensacola, Florida, and we also had a week off, but we fortunately had no ice. So I hope you're digging out by now.
Yeah, we're slowly getting there, but it has been remarkable because we just thought it was a regular snowstorm and with a little bit of sleet, but it ended up being a little bit more than what people expected.
Weather is weird these days. So why
Yeah.
don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, what you're focused on right now, and then we can talk a little about AI and how it's affecting our industry.
Yeah, sounds great. So, I am the chief executive officer of a consulting firm called Pariveda Solutions. What we do is we do advisory work, execution work, as well as managed services from a product lens perspective. And, my entire career has always been in consulting. I think consulting really suited me. I just love meeting people, seeing new problems, seeing patterns of problems, and that continuous learning aspect and pushing me on like an area to a level of discomfort in that learning and the pace in which you have to learn has always been very appealing to me. So I'm one of those people that has essentially been a lifelong consultant. So being able to lead one is really, truly an honor to be able to do so. And especially in this time, right? Because things are changing so quickly. And we just as a society have hit so many different types of unexpected, what feels like black swan events, right? Everything starting from the pandemic, the recovery from the pandemic, the great resignation, seeing some contraction, a change in administration, tech disruption. It's all coming really quickly in succession. And of course, it's challenging all the leaders. I'm sure you're feeling the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think you're hitting on a good point. Not only is the technology accelerating, but we have all these societal aspects that are magnifying the impacts. So it's a
Yeah.
really good point.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk a lot about that in the firm. We talk about that pace of change because you think about where we were in the industrial revolution and how long it took for that to propagate. And of course, the internet and the information highway really sped that up. And then you kept going, right? All of a sudden cell phones made everything so much more accessible within minutes. You no longer had to be hardwired to a landline in order to LAN for all of those young people out there, for us to be able to really see the data that's flowing. And of course, that led to that Spider-Man saying of with great power comes great responsibility. You see it being used both for good and not so good purposes. And, as humans, we see the after effects, right? We're always really good in hindsight and we go, oh, wow, that was actually not so great. And now we're seeing the repercussions of it. We're actually having to deal with the repercussions of it. And we have lots of examples of that. So things going faster and faster um, is a norm. And it is an interesting transition for all of us in society to kind of wrap our heads around.
I completely agree. I think that's part of, saw a diagram recently mapping back to the invention of electricity and then, automotive and trains and telephones and the internet. And to your point, the map they used was when the first 20% of households had adopted that technology, the distance is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, right? And so now
Yeah.
AI, within 2 years, really, we're up to, 20% of consumers are using the tools. So as we think about that, and of course, to your point, hindsight, right? We look backwards and we think what it has done so far, and of course, we're fearful of what it might do in the near term. So if we look at that for a minute, how have you seen AI affecting your relationship with your clients, their businesses, their products? What have you seen is the impact today? And do you think it will be this fast acceleration of reducing the need for people in the mid market? Because I know we're obviously seeing UPS and Amazon and a lot of big organizations are doing cuts, and you can pretty clearly attribute it to AI, even if they don't want to. I think in the mid market, we're seeing something different. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a number of layers here that I think are really interesting. One is, when we talk about some of the big layoffs, especially the one recently on Amazon, right? They were laying off anywhere between I've seen 14 to 16,000 in terms of those numbers, and some of that one might say, well, AI is causing that, and there's some truth to that, but probably not in the same way that people are thinking. Meaning, people aren't actually getting replaced necessarily by AI in those situations. Andy Jassy has always been very explicit. Hey, I want to lean out, I want to flatten out an organization. And people are shifting the concentration of resources, right? So when we saw Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, metaverses are going to be the thing, he threw in a lot of money into the metaverse. And now he's laying off all those people in the metaverse because he's shifting his resources over to the generative AI space. So some of it is that shift in resources in the race for some sort of AI dominance, if not prominence. And I don't think what we're seeing in terms of investment in AI. Everybody's just trying to figure out what it can and cannot do, and what's the level of risk in the use case application where it actually generates some level of value. I do think in some cases it's not gonna go as fast as what Anthropic and Perplexity, you hear them all the time. They're like, "Your whole entire org chart is gonna be replaced by AI agents." And I don't think that's true. I think there's gonna be some tasks that are gonna be done by AI agents that can be done safely, um, and we're still in the early stages of trying to figure out how to maintain that over time. Um, but organizations right now are led by people. And if you don't always bring in new people and train them up, those experiences that they need to become great leaders becomes muted, and it becomes less accessible. And without that opportunity to be able to go through the process of learning, then we rob people of their potential to be able to become great leaders.
I think you're also touching a little bit of not just the AI impact, but during COVID, of course, we all started working from home, and now we've been working through this social shift of getting back into the office or not or mixed. But I think a big piece of what we're seeing is impact you just touched on is for those junior people, like as you're bringing in new people at the lower levels and they're not in the office as much, or maybe resisting the office, they're missing out on those leadership development opportunities. They're missing out on those shadowing opportunities to watch great leaders lead. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts there, and are there ways to help them remotely still get those benefits?
Yeah, I think there's always a balance, right? You can't go to one extreme or the other. It's not necessarily black and white. And one of the things I think is really interesting about the pandemic is the folks that got hired into the pandemic world got normalized to a level of remote capabilities, right? Many of us were forced into it. The folks that started work at that time started that way. So they were normalized. There for them, the normal was working from home all the time. And when we had to say, hey, people need to start being in person because here's why that's important, of course that's going to feel different, disruptive to the way that they had normalized in that work. So, we've always believed that hybrid is the right thing. Like, you got to have some level of flexibility in your workspace. We want people to have families. We want people to manage what they have to do in their personal lives, um, and be accountable to their team while doing it. So, I do think that we've we we see that trend quite a bit. I'll say that the younger generation, we hire a lot out of college, and we see a lot of folks these days that are like, "We wanna be in office." When they come into office, they look around, they wanna interact, they wanna build relationships, and I'm sure you and I can both think about our first careers and how much you wanted to be around those people because you actually spent a lot of time around your colleagues, and they were your social outlet often. You would go out for a drink after work or go to an activity or a show after work. And if you're not coming in, you just don't get those opportunities to interact on a personal level. And those are the friendships that stay with you for a really long time throughout your career.
And I agree. I think a big shift, at least what we're seeing, is early in my career, it was 100% travel for everybody. And so you absolutely, especially as consultants, are put together in a room, sometimes a broom closet, working on the
Yeah, yeah.
project, and then after
Working
your
on a
12-hour
table.
day, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So after your 12-hour day, you had to go for that drink, and the ones you went with were your coworkers, your co-consultants. And I think I agree with you. A lot of my longtime friends are from that period in my life, but I think we've seen, at least at our organization, we've seen less projects where they want people to travel in. They're letting us do more remote work. And to your point, it encourages more work-life balance, which I
Mhm,
think is healthy for all of
mhm,
us. But I think we have, at least our experience has been a number of younger consultants coming into it that are hungry for those 90-hour weeks because
mhm.
they just see all the energy they have and they want to pour it into this. I think what we've liked is encouraging them to diversify the way they spend that time, not pour it all into the client work, but maybe themselves at some level and continuing education and growing their capabilities rather than just directly into client billable time. I don't know. Have you found there's other ways to put that energy to work, or are you finding they are making the social time too still?
Yeah, I think we really encourage in our firm to be really holistic and well-rounded. So we do look at internal projects, ways to share knowledge, self-development, group development. So there are definitely ways that we want them to pour. We always say to our clients, "Hey, we learn for your benefit, right? We're not going to know everything from the get-go, but if we can teach people on how to learn and learn quickly and apply it to your context and your situation, well, you're all the better for it, right? Because we can bring ideas to the table." And so there is a lot of encouragement for that self development. There's actually an expectation for that self development within our firm, and I think that's really important. It's a skill that I don't think people always invest in. And when we interview folks in college, you'll find people who learn for the classroom and nothing else. And those are not the right people for consulting, because you need people who are willing to go through the difficult experience of learning, so that it really imprints upon your memory and your ability to apply that knowledge. And frankly, make mistakes, right? Because the mistakes are how we learn. I always talk about how learning and the pain of learning is something that you need to go through, and that's what makes effective growth.
Completely agree. That makes a lot of sense. Well, along those lines, to your point, we can't, if something brand new, we can't have all the answers out of the gate, right? We have to learn as well. AI was definitely an experience along those lines as it came to market. We have to
Yeah.
figure out, how to apply it and make it effective and solve problems. What was kind of your approach to that space, and how have you been applying it internally? Like, what has it been that's helped Pariveda change as a result of AI, as well as how you deploy it for clients?
Yeah, I think when it first came out, nobody knew what it really could do. So a lot of us were doing exactly what you would hear about. Like you would get onto ChatGPT and you'd be like, "Hey, I've got something in my refrigerator. Tell me what to make for dinner." Right? And you were just testing it out because you had no idea what the capabilities were. And frankly, at that time, the capabilities were pretty basic. So it became this supercharged Google, right? The
Hmm.
supercharged internet search engine. And what we did over time is we kept playing with it. Now we made mistakes. Our first year, we invested in a particular group. I'm not sure if I should say it out loud. That turned out to be a lot of vaporware. But I'm sure many of you know
That
what I'm
happens.
talking about. Uh, and that was an unfortunate waste of our resources, being,
Yeah.
a mid-market consulting firm, you don't have that luxury. It's very painful. And so we ended up making huge shifts. And at one point we had a huge initiative for our clients where we said, "Hey, we're all learning, we're all trying to figure this out. We're going to build POCs for you and we're just going to show you what we think is it's capable within your own organizations." And that was helpful to get our people started to applying it and seeing actually where a lot of the pitfalls were. If you watch the news at that time, and I'm willing to bet if we did some sort of study on keyword studies, like the hype of AI was insane. Like the hype curve that you hear about, we were definitely on that accelerated uptick, and everybody said it was going to change the future. And while it does do some things really, really well, I mean, we know today that it does a lot of things not so well. And so what we've always been is closer to playing to learn, sharing to learn, and gifting to learn. But then we tend to be more of a fast follower for ourselves because we know the limitations. And I do think that because of the way our business is constructed, Mark, I think we push our people to learn all the time. And so our ability to be able to absorb that capabilities and the constant changing and what people are launching all the time in AI is probably more advanced than typical organizations are. I think that's just the nature of consulting. I just think that there's so much more that is going on. I usually equate this to back in 2000 during the dot-com era. Everybody started becoming a content management system because everybody was trying to figure out how to put up a website. And then people were like, wait, I need to make money on a website. You remember everybody in the news was like, hey, I've put up my news articles on the website. Oh, wait, I just robbed my subscription model. And they started,
Yes.
New York Times put up a paywall and everybody said, oh, you're going to be in trouble. But in fact, that was the smartest thing that they had done because they were the leader in making sure that their content was held its value in this free marketplace. And everybody started coming out, every technology company came out with a content management system. And they got more and more complex. And then, just like in that divergence of content management systems, you saw them start to merge. Some won, some did not, some completely imploded. And we're going to see the same thing with AI. It's going to go faster. And it was, I think in the Wall Street Journal, they talked about how one of the most valuable generative AI companies has no product, has no services. It's just based on the hype, and we've seen that story before.
Yeah, along the lines of everything from early crypto to the NFTs, there's always these hype cycles, and
NFT was really short.
I know some don't pan out like NFT, and others turn into $100,000 a coin. So it just depends on where it goes in the end. So I think along those lines with the hype cycles and the challenges, and you're helping clients think about what the right next step is or how to put these things in order because obviously even big organizations can't tackle everything at once. They've got to
Mhm.
pick their priorities. Do you usually find it's more lean towards something that they start with maybe isn't going to be high risk for your production environment, meaning find things in between that can add value but show the outcome, or is it more tackle those big gnarly issues that are right in the middle of profit to increase the profit or reduce the cost? Which way
Yeah.
do you usually lean?
What we see with our clients mostly is smaller POCs that can go to production. So they are looking for proof points, things that hopefully can be measurable. Sometimes they are major experiments. We've built POCs, for instance, for mental health within hospitals, like a way for self-service on mental health, which is a little bit interesting, right, in self-service, but it's not saying in this particular POC, it wasn't creating a digital therapist. It was basically trying to route people to resources um, that might help them. So we tend to see things that are going to help from that level if they're going to do a POC. We do have strategy engagements that talk about where should we be focused on POCs or where should we be focused on AI and how do we integrate it into our business. And, usually the things that are revealed are very similar to what we saw in any sort of technology adoption or disruption is you have to have your fundamentals in good shape. So your foundation of your data, the cleanliness of your data, the accessibility of your data has to be in good shape. We know that from just the LLMs themselves, when you have garbage in, they're going to create some significant drift and some significant risk. And so when people are in industries where they can't afford that kind of risk, they're seeking perfection. It's one of the reasons why you have to always have the human in the loop in those kind of situations. I would also say that the opportunity to me is really on the upside. We've got to apply this kind of technology and capabilities into the value chain such that you get the upside. Because operations and efficiencies and optimization has a floor, right? There's only so fast a human can run. At some point, we're going to hit the floor when we get, especially if you actually get rid of all the technology, the fancy shoes and the fancy outfits and things like that.
Yes.
There's probably a floor to what a natural human can run. They can't run within a blink of an eye. So the same thing is for optimization. There's a floor that you're going to hit, and there have been all sorts of funny experiments where somebody created a generative or AI agent run company. They simulated that,
Yeah.
and everything went to pot within like 2 days. Um,
Yes.
and because you're working with rules, and then the rules also will have drift. We know that this technology creates drift, even if you have the most perfect data, and it always has to be retuned and reset and brought back. And it's one of the reasons why I think it's really interesting. I am a believer in his name is Miss is escaping me right now, but the gentleman who just left Facebook can. He talked about how LLMs are not the thing that's going to get us to artificial general intelligence, right? It's going to be a different model, and he's actually created a startup now for
I
that.
think you're
And
referring to the physical studies, right? So where the AI is taught on physics rather than on text.
yeah,
That's the
yes.
next major step that I'm hearing more about right now. It's
Well,
still
and
very early stage.
yeah, and some of it is the idea that real world modeling, right, which is the physics part, it's the real world modeling that is gonna help. And if we can understand the real world model, then you don't have to use the probabilities quite the way that they're being used now.
Because a piece of it is the argument I'm hearing is it's how we learn, right? And so if we are effectively general intelligence, why wouldn't we want to teach artificial general intelligence in the same way as how we
Exactly.
learn as babies and children and interactions with the real world and seeing the touch and the feel and how the water drops rather than, being told about it, right? It's
Yeah,
different experience.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. No. So I think it's gonna be, I agree with you. There's so much coming. I think there's more limits than we originally had hoped for, right? I think it's not the be all end all, and we have so much more to go with it. And I think what I'm also hearing you say is that you agree this not only is not what can replace humans or fix all of our problems, but that it's going to be much less than that, right? It's going to take us time to find the right applications, make sure and keep the human in the loop, and find where it's going to have value that doesn't create unnecessary drift and risk. I think that's kind of what
Yes.
I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that work will change and the nature of work will change. I think people want to move away from the busy work, right? We want, as companies don't want to pay people to do busy work either, right? They want people for their innovation and their creativity and their critical thinking, and they want them to work on projects, not on menial tasks. So I do think the nature of work is going to change, and there are good studies right now that talk about the challenges and how we, just like a K-shaped economy, you could end up in a K-shaped level of learning where people who have developed critical thinking, leadership, or the ability for reading and comprehension and synthesis are going to surpass other people who don't have those skills built up and use AI. So the application of AI for folks that don't have those skills will make them incrementally more effective. But the folks that already have some of these foundational learning skills in place will catapult over others. And, people talk about AI replacing people. And I think it's more people will be replaced by the folks that learn AI.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. That's the argument I've been hearing for a while that I'm seeing proved out, right? Is that the organizations we work with that figure out the right ways to plug AI in and manage that risk that we've discussed end up getting ahead of their competition. And they really do
Uh-huh.
see that revenue on top. Because ultimately, I think what it keeps doing is figure out what you do really well whether that be, we're seeing in the mid market even for construction companies, for lighting companies, folks that do physical things and they do it really well. This just puts the bookkeeping to make it easy. It makes the marketing really easy. It makes project management really easy, and you get to focus on what you do. I think that's
Uh-huh.
the big impact we've been seeing is to your point, is there is a human role for sure. There's a human in the loop in these other aspects. Like you still need to have a human look at the books and make sure they're accurate, but the computer does the mundane work, which has been a really powerful step.
Yeah, you definitely don't wanna be, sending the work that comes from an AI agent or from generative AI without reviewing it, because we've already
Yeah.
seen within our industry how that has really exposed companies, those consulting firms, to risk and frankly, a terrible public, embarrassment, during that time.
Yes.
And I thought of that computer sciences. It's Yann LeCun.
Okay.
Yann LeCun.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, Margaret, is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience today?
I think the huge thing for me when people are thinking about AI again is you have to embrace it for sure. It's not something you want to run away from. You know, I think about my own personal journey and taking the time to actually invest in it. You know, I played with it and toyed with it and made it write Seinfeld scripts for me just to
Yeah.
see if it could do that. And it was mediocre, by the way. It did some fun things. But I also started really digging into it and seeing and trying to find the limitations. I often come at it with a little bit of a skeptical eye because there are folks that will hype it up and say it's going to save everybody. And then I look at it, I'm like, no, clearly it's got its shortcomings. And if you know what the shortcomings on, then you can really apply it well, right? And embrace it really well. And clearly in my world, I feel like I've used it in a way that has helped me and I've used it in ways that actually hindered me and didn't work out very well. And so I think at the end of the day, one, we have to figure it out, at least in society, with how to apply it in our education system because, you know, kids today don't exercise the same level of judgment. We tend to be very outcomes based in our learning. Get the grade, finish the assignment. And again, to me, the pain of learning is what makes people resilient and makes people fearless in
Yeah.
growing themselves. I think the second thing is in organizations, you cannot cut off the entry level positions because you will have no one to lead the company in the future. And they need the exposure, they need the interaction. And the more that you can be in person in your later parts of the years of your career, you might be able to get away with it in early stages because you're usually an individual contributor. But later on in life, in order to be a leader, in order to have impact and influence, you have to learn how to be in the presence of others and how to communicate your thoughts really clearly in those moments and see how people react to you because you can see so much more than you can virtually or in some cases you know you don't even see anything, all you hear is the voice because the cameras are off. So
Yes.
you know this is we are not in a situation where this is going to happen by 2030 or 2030. It's we are still a long ways away from uh any sort of minority report kind of scenario. But, you know, if we make ourselves a part of that journey, then we can be very successful in it.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I think the importance of the human and that growth we have together is something that we just can't get other ways. So I
Yeah.
agree. Find that
Yeah,
time in the
absolutely.
office and be that mentor.
Yeah,
It's great.
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for the time today. I appreciate all the input here. I think really good insights for AI, and yeah, I know RTO wasn't a part of our plan, but I'm glad we got to talk a little about how important that is. 'Cause I really do think the two tie together in certain ways that we've been overlooking.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.